Very warm welcome from me. Very nice to be able to kick off this new year. Hopefully an easier year for all of us. But welcome if you're tuning in for the first time. Welcome if you're a regular at our London Buddhist Centre events. Welcome if you've just been on our winter retreat over the New Year period. Welcome wherever you are. One of the wonderful things about online teaching has been that we've been expanding, as it were, our Sangha to be worldwide. So particularly welcome if you're from further afield. In London, it's a cold, dark night at the moment. Very cold, very dark. And the Prime Minister is going to speak to us later on, probably sending us into something more like lockdown. But I'm going to urge you to put all of that aside, because I want to talk about something in a way far more important, in a way far more far-reaching than our current state of affairs, even though they may be very, very difficult. So I was asked to speak about the transcendental context of meditation, the transcendental context of meditation. And I'm not going to try and define what transcendental means. Hopefully you'll pick up a flavour of it as I speak. A flavour of what I mean by it anyway, or what the Buddha meant by it. When I came to meditation, when I first came to the London Buddhist Centre, it was in the early 90s. I sort of started to think of myself as a Buddhist when I was much younger than that, when I was in my teens. But I didn't discover the London Buddhist Centre until my late 20s, partly because it wasn't that easy to discover Buddhism. I mean, to find Buddhism. I don't mean discover in some sort of esoteric sense. I mean literally to find a building like the London Buddhist Centre. I used to live in North London. Here we are now in Bethnal Green in East London. I never really came to East London. I didn't know anybody in East London. London's a huge place. If you don't need to travel to East London, why would you? There was no internet when I was searching for Buddhism, and you had these big, thick directories, telephone directories, and the London Buddhist Centre didn't seem to be listed, or at least I couldn't find it. And so discovering the London Buddhist Centre was a bit of a magical adventure in itself. It felt like all sorts of things had to conspire to come together, or at least in my mind, it was a bit of a mythic thing, even finding the London Buddhist Centre. Even coming across it. And meditation in those days was distinctly strange, peculiar thing to be doing. It still had, on the positive side, it had a sense of something esoteric, something that was going to take you into states of consciousness that were extraordinary. It had a sense of danger about it. Was it going to do you harm? What was it going to do to your mind? What would you discover if you went inwards with meditation? Should you do it on your own? There was still, I remember, a sense that you really shouldn't meditate without guidance from an experienced teacher. And then Buddhism was even more strange and esoteric. It was, for me, it was definitely associated with becoming a monk or a nun, I guess, wearing robes, Tibetan Buddhists with their colourful hats and regalia, Sri Lankan Buddhists with their very simple cotton robes, but all of them with a touch of mystery about it. Zen Buddhists beating you over the head or on your back with a stick, making you kneel outside in the snow before you could enter the monastery. making you do all sorts of weird things like work out how to get the goose out of the bottle, and when you got the answer wrong, being beaten again. All of that was in my mind when I came to the London Buddhist Centre, as well as the fear that then, it was some weird, mysterious cult that I was going to get initiated into, and before I knew it, I'd be called something like Jnanavaca, and my life would never be the same again. Little did I know. And anyway, so there were all these kind of sort of dangers associated with meditating with Buddhism, at least in my mind, as well as a sense of magic, a sense of I was being initiated, if I so chose, into arcane, ancient truths that were profound and would open up for me the mystery of life, give me the key, the secrets to the meaning of life. That was how I approached it as a young 27-year-old. Now these days, I've been teaching for many years since I've been ordained, and most people have now heard of meditation. Meditation, and even Buddhism, has been pretty mainstream. To find a Buddhist centre, all you have to do is Google, search for Buddhist centre in your city or town, and up will pop probably a whole variety of choices where you can go and practice different sorts of Buddhism. They're all available, particularly in a city like London. And meditation is recommended not just by Buddhists, but even by the National Health Service in the UK for preventing relapse into depression or addiction. In fact, we teach at the London Buddhist Centre mindfulness practices, meditations for just those things, as well as for trying to prevent or manage stress, for example. It's become a mainstream tool. I've met people who have got A-levels in Buddhism and degrees in Buddhism. It's part of our culture. Perhaps not, perhaps it's got some way to go. Perhaps people still think of it as, a bit strange. But more and more it's becoming mainstream. And I think that is really positive. One of the reasons why at the London Buddhist Centre we've grown so much is that so many more people can find us simply by Googling London and Buddhism. I think it's wonderful that there isn't a stigma attached to meditation, and that Buddhism generally has a good press in our modern Western culture. All of that is great, I think. It's much more available. I was talking just yesterday, I think, to somebody who works in finance, and he was telling me that, meditation is acceptable amongst hedge fund managers, to manage their workload pressures and so forth. So on the one hand, I really rejoice in the fact that Buddhism has entered our culture, is entering our culture, and meditation particularly so. And then another part of me laments the fact that it is so mainstream, that it is so easy, that it is so, in so many people's mind, aligned with well-being, health and well-being. Now this is, for me, I don't want you to get me wrong. I've got a nuanced position here. I really think that meditation for health and well-being is a good thing. I think it's fantastic if we can work on helping people with their mental health through meditation techniques deriving from the Buddhist tradition. Buddhism, after all, is concerned most centrally with transforming our minds and mental health is, you could say, the necessary foundation for any further development of the mind. You know, we have to have a sense of being okay with ourselves in the world before we can move towards something more lofty like enlightenment. So I think it's really good that many people are coming to the Dharma, coming to meditation particularly, with a need, well, they're addressing their need for well-being. What I lament, what I fear, is that Buddhism and meditation is seen as only a remedy for mental health problems. If it becomes limited to a well-being agenda, because that would be such a travesty of what the Buddha was teaching and what Buddhism has to offer, what the London Buddhist Centre has to offer, what I'm trying to do with my life, what Maitreya Bandhu is trying to do with his life, what order members with our order, the Triratna Buddhist order, is now, I don't know, over 2,000 people. I don't know exact numbers, all over the world, or pretty much all over the world. What all of those order members are doing is something far more than the well-being strapline might imply. Yeah. So it's the more that I want to talk about, but I don't want to at the same time say that meditation for well-being, health and well-being, mental health and well-being is wrong. I think it's really positive. So in a way, whatever's brought you to the London Buddhist Centre, to meditation, to Buddhism, I think it's valid. Whatever has brought you here. What I want to say is don't stop not only in exploring the Dharma further, but don't stop in terms of let's keep on looking at our motivations for practice, and let's keep on deepening those motivations, expanding them, making them more and more lofty, aligning them with the tremendous riches that the Buddha opened up 2,500 years ago. Because even if all over the world nobody suffered from mental health issues, if nobody suffered from depression, nobody suffered from chronic anxiety or stress, even if that were the case, and that feels like a remarkable dream, doesn't it? A world where people are not suffering in that way, in those hellish mental states. Even if that were true, there would still be the problem of what do we do with our lives? What do we do with this sense of well-being? What do we do with the fact that we're mortal? What do we do with the fact that we will die and all those around us will die? That sickness and death can take us at any moment. What do we do with that? Well, as Gandalf says, what do we do with the time that has been given to us? And that I think is, and I don't mean to be glib about it. I think working out what we're trying to do with our lives is perhaps the most important thing that we can do with our lives. Not in a navel-gazing sort of adolescent way of sitting there thinking, I don't know who I am or what I want to do, but in a way of discovering actively, through the living of life, discovering what it's for. And I'm going to suggest that it's more than the meaning of life, whatever that is, has to be more than one's own well-being. It has to be more than one's own happiness even, both sort of physical and mental happiness and well-being. Happiness and well-being is not enough. It's not worthy enough as an ultimate goal for us. I mean, one way of approaching that is think of a time, and hopefully you can all think of a time, where you have been happy and where you've got what you wanted. You've got just what you wanted. Maybe somebody's bought you just the right present at Christmas. Maybe it's as small as that. Maybe they gave you exactly what you wanted. Maybe you've got the partner that you wanted, the house that you wanted, the flat that you wanted, the job that you wanted. Holidays, you remember holidays? Maybe you can remember a time when you had the holiday of your dreams, possibly with the person or persons of your dreams, the perfect situation. Maybe perfect is too high an ideal. Certainly I can remember getting what I wanted in terms of my job, in terms of my friendships. I was fortunate enough to study at Oxford University. I was surrounded by incredible beauty and privilege and good friends, and I was young and healthy, and everything was going my way. And I can remember time and time again these sort of maudlin conversations, probably because I was drunk, or these lonely kind of walks, existential walks in fields and parks, agonizing about what I was doing. What was the meaning of life? This wasn't enough. It was wonderful, and I just felt there had to be more to life. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I'm not particularly unusual in that. I think that most of us at some point in our lives have felt that what life is offering us isn't enough. What the world of business and consumerism and advertising and money and power is offering us isn't enough. I think most of us have had that sense. If you haven't had that sense yet, I hope you do. I hope you do at some point have that sense. Because if we are completely satisfied with our lot, I think that's slightly tragic. I think something in us hasn't yet woken up to the potential that there is for discovering more. It's only when we have that sense, that intimation that there is more to us, more to life than our ordinary secular consumerist world seems to offer us. It's only when we wake up to that in a way the journey to that discovery of more begins. There's so that's one way of talking about what I mean by there's more to meditation and Buddhism than health and well-being. The other thing I came across just today was I was rereading bits of Iain McGilchrist's book, The Master and His Emissary. Iain McGilchrist, I'm not going to be able to go into his thesis, his wonderful thesis. This is the book, or at least this is the copy of the book that I've got, The Master and His Emissary. I really recommend it. He's a psychiatrist, a writer. He was also a lecturer in literature, in English literature at Oxford. He currently lives on the Isle of Skye. Maitreya Bandhu and I interviewed him recently. You can find the interviews on YouTube somewhere. Anyway, Iain McGilchrist was talking about self-esteem. And remember, so he's a psychiatrist. And he was talking about how our quest for self-esteem is not unmixed. And I find that interesting because a lot of people come to, well, I'm slightly conflating now self-esteem and well-being, and that probably doesn't do his thinking justice. But you know how in the West we are often looking for validation of our self-esteem, and if we suffer from low self-esteem, then there's something wrong with us. And of course, to an extent, that's fair. Iain McGilchrist acknowledges that low self-esteem can lead to depression and other mental health problems. But one of the things he's saying is that high self-esteem has its dangers too. high self-esteem has its dangers too. So let me just read you a little bit of what he says about the dangers of high self-esteem, because I think they're pertinent when we think about why is it that we're meditating, why is it that we're attracted to meditation and Buddhism. Emphasis on high self-esteem as a sign of mental health is a relatively recent Western phenomenon. So that's interesting, it's recent, and is far from being an unmixed good. Then he acknowledges that yes, low self-esteem is problematic too. But he also says that high self-esteem is correlated with a tendency to be unrealistic, to take offence too easily, and to become violent and demanding if one's needs are not met. So that's interesting, isn't it? It's correlated, positively correlated, with a tendency to be unrealistic, to take offence too easily, and to become violent and demanding if one's needs are not met. And I think that our culture, if we're not careful, is heading towards these unrealistic expectations of ourselves and of other people, a tendency to take offence very easily, and a real demanding attitude if our needs are not met, and not met now, not met immediately. He says that this isn't a universal kind of concept, but it's rooted in significant aspects of North American culture. He says, for example, it's not true in Japan, where he says it's not true in Japan, where self-worth is not predicated on thinking highly of yourself, but on being a good citizen and a member of your social group. On being a good citizen and a member of your social group. Whereas I think in the modern West, certainly in London, it's a very individualized, atomized society that we've created. And so self-esteem, high self-esteem, is all about me being great and getting what I want. I was talking to Matt, who I live with, about this. I was reading him, and he was telling me that in the last World Cup, when Japan were playing their matches, all the Japanese fans, all the Japanese crowd would, at the end of the game, clear up after themselves and clean the stadium, tidy the stadium after their games, even if they'd won, even if they were fantastic, or even if they'd lost. I can't imagine that happening in the West. I can't imagine people even doing that on the tube or on the bus. We live in a very, very different worldview where happiness is getting what I want and never mind the wider community. Now, what am I doing? I'm giving an extreme example. I'm parodying it. I know that it's not true. There is a sense of community in many, many places. Dare I say, even in London, thankfully. But the culture is definitely heading towards the direction that I've been indicating, that McGilchrist has been indicating. And what I fear is, to get back to Buddhism and meditation, I fear that meditation and even Buddhism can be used just to bolster this desire for more and more high self-esteem. To bolster me getting what I want. So now I can have the great career and the great partner and the great holiday and the great house and so forth. And guess what? I'm going to use meditation to help manage my way to that. It's again, maybe I'm parodying, but I don't think I'm parodying in an unrecognizable way. So for me, that's a danger of our of Buddhism becoming more normalized in our Western society. What I'm trying to highlight is that I would hate for Buddhism to be assimilated to the values of individualism and consumerism and this culture of extremely high expectations for oneself and one's friends and others around us, and this culture of taking offence, getting righteously indignant if somebody else doesn't say or do the right thing or behave in the way that we think is correct. All in the pursuit of my happiness, one's own happiness. So Buddhism is not really about any of that. As maybe I should move on to try and illustrate. Oh no, before I do, I want to talk about one more way, one more way in which I think that Buddhism is potentially in danger of being assimilated into a Western worldview. And that's that increasingly, even amongst Buddhists, there's this notion that Buddhism is somehow a secular discipline, that it's like a form of psychotherapy, that you don't have to have any belief or faith in anything beyond this world of material form, that we don't have to, in a way, believe in anything beyond the body and beyond death of the body, that it's Buddhism is somehow aligned with science. It's not a religion. Now, all of that there's some truth in it, but it's also devastatingly wrong. It's devastatingly wrong. It's what we're doing is that we've got this popular notion of scientific materialism, that matter is all there is, that matter is inert, that we're just biological machines, and when the body dies, we do too, everything dies, that consciousness is just a product of the brain. So that's a very quick and rough and ready description of what I mean, at least, by scientific materialism. I'm sure there's more nuanced definitions, but that's what I mean when I say it. And one of the dangers is that we think that Buddhism is somehow aligned with that, and it's really not. It really isn't. It so much isn't that it's a travesty to even talk, I think, about secular Buddhism. Personally, I don't mind if somebody wants to practice meditation and the teachings of Buddhism from a secular perspective. I don't mind that. I think fair enough. If that's doing you some good, then good luck. But what I mind is when people say that Buddhism itself is aligned with those secular notions, because that's a falsification of the Dharma. And I know that from my own experience. It's very interesting, actually, when I've met people who are very new to Buddhism, sometimes very new to meditation, but are really opinionated about what Buddhism is and what meditation is. And that's another consequence of it becoming more and more mainstream. So sometimes people approach the London Buddhist Centre and have very strong opinions about how we should be running things. And God, I don't think that can ever have happened in the 2,500 year history of Buddhism. That a newcomer approaches an institution that's religious, a Buddhist centre in this case, approaches people who have been practicing for decades. Traditionally, you know, like in Japan, you approach on your knees. I'm not saying we should do that either, but that is more in line with the tradition. But it's quite remarkable to have people post on Facebook or Slack or whatever it is, very strong views about how we should be running and how we should not be doing certain things and teaching certain things, and we're wrong and they're right. And, you know, I like a good debate, but I am slightly aghast at the certainty and the lack of humility when you're approaching something as vast as Buddhism. Actually, even if you're approaching, what is it, like Maitreya Bandhu, when he learns, and he's still learning, to write poetry. He approaches it as a thing where you constantly are receptive to those that know more, who have been practicing that craft for longer. I wouldn't have dreamed of, when I was 18, 19, studying physics at Oxford, I wouldn't have dreamed of telling my tutors that they'd got relativity wrong. It's slightly breathtaking. But anyway, I've gone off on a rant, and forgive me if this doesn't apply to you. But there you go. So let me talk a little bit. So I've just said some of the dangers, haven't I, about... I've started with the negatives, some of the dangers of seeing Buddhism in those secular terms. I've talked about assimilating it into Western culture. I've talked about one of the problems of Western culture is allied to this sort of high self-esteem, this extremely high expectation. I've talked about scientific materialism as misrepresenting what Buddhism is. I've talked about health and well-being as being completely valid when it comes to meditation as a motive for practicing meditation, but it's really limited if you think that that's all meditation is. Yeah. So I'll leave that there. So then let's look at what is a traditional Buddhist approach to meditation. So I'm going to talk for another 10-15 minutes, and then just to say that we'll have a short break, and then I'm going to come back and carry on talking. So what is a traditional approach to Buddhist meditation? Well, you can't, first of all, traditionally separate meditation from Buddhism, and you can't separate Buddhism from its worldviews. So the view behind Dharma practice has traditionally been that we're on an endless round of birth and death and rebirth and redeath. That this consciousness has found this form, this body, but after the death of the body, something of consciousness, whatever consciousness is, and it's not a thing, it's not an entity, but it's more like a process, it's more like a stream, a current of energy, something of that stream of conscious energy, consciousness, is freed from the body at the death of the body, and eventually finds another form and another embodied life, either as a human being or in some other realm. And the Buddhist traditional vision is that there are many other realms, that human life on earth is just one possible realm. There are non-material beings, for example, beings made of light, angelic beings. There are realms where, they're heavenly realms, there are hellish realms, there are all sorts of realms in between. And yes, it's a far bigger magical vision than a scientific materialist perspective on what's going on. I'm not saying you have to believe all this. I'm saying that this is a traditional Buddhist position, and it's the position that I hold. The key thing with this round of samsara, as it's called, this round of birth and death, this endless round, is that it's not a positive thing. The Buddha saw this as being characterized by pain. Not every moment of every life needs to be painful, but overall, this becoming embodied, striving for fulfillment and happiness, being somehow thwarted in that quest, dying and then doing it all over again, is tragic. It's seen as a tragic vision. We may not see it as tragic. We might quite like the thought that we can come back and have another go. But anyway, traditionally, it's seen as something to transcend, something tragic. Partly because the Buddha recognized that even in life, if you get everything that you have always yearned for, the heart isn't completely satisfied. There's always this yearning for more. Complete fulfillment, complete lasting fulfillment eludes us in any embodied form, whether that's human form or even if you're reborn in an angelic kind of divine heaven form. Complete lasting fulfillment is always beyond us, beyond that form. Because it's as if there's something in consciousness, there's something in the human heart that yearns for the infinite. And form is finite. That's what form is. It's finite. The body is finite. And we're yearning for something beyond boundaries, which Buddhism says can be found. This ultimate fulfillment can be found. And there's a path to that ultimate fulfillment, that path to Buddhahood, that path to enlightenment, that path to nirvana, however you want to term it. And Buddhism uses lots of different terms. There is a path to it. There is a way out of this endless round of yearning and being thwarted, and then dying and doing it over again. And that path is characterized, at least in Triratna, as a spiral, like a golden spiral, which you gradually ascend towards enlightenment. It's important that it's a spiral and not a linear path, because in a sense you never leave practices like awareness and kindness and generosity behind. You just practice them at higher and higher levels until enlightenment is reached. And enlightenment, well, I'm not going to be able to even really go into or touch on or hint at. All I can say is that traditionally it's another category of consciousness. It's not just more fulfillment. It's not just like me or you on a really happy good day plus some. It's a different category of consciousness. It's a new consciousness that can arise in a human consciousness, in a human form. You know how you can draw a category, and I know these categories have blurs, the edges aren't always extreme, but you can draw a category between an animal's consciousness, I'm thinking a penguin for some reason, and a human consciousness. A penguin, I think they're conscious. I think all animals are conscious. I think plants are conscious. I think consciousness has gradations, degrees. But in animal consciousness, in a sense, you could call it simple consciousness. It's consciousness of one's senses, sense environments. It's driven by instincts to mate, to feed, to survive, etc. But it's not usually the sort of rational, it doesn't have the powers of reason that human beings can have. It doesn't normally have the self-awareness, the self-reflexive self-consciousness, the awareness that I'm aware. Animal consciousness isn't usually associated with that. So human consciousness, you could say, is a different category. It includes animal consciousness, and then it has a step change in the sorts of abilities that human consciousness is capable of. Well, enlightened consciousness is like that. It can include all the faculties that human beings have in human consciousness, like reason, like self-awareness, but it transcends them with another dimension. And the potential for enlightened consciousness, this new type of consciousness, is there in human consciousness. It's like the seeds are always already there in any human consciousness. And in a sense, and I'm speaking sort of poetically, but I don't mean by that poetic truth can be more real than scientific truth. In a sense, I think that our task as human beings is to nurture those seeds, to allow them to grow, to sprout, to flower into a fully fledged Buddhahood. I think that that's what human life is for. I think that we've all been here before. We've all had embodiment before. We're on around, and I think that we're here to learn. We're here to grow. It's like I was listening to a psychologist, and he was calling. He had coined the term Earth School. Earth School. It's like this is a school, and this embodied form that we call human, that I call me, is here to grow, to learn. And that growth is a growth in consciousness, primarily. It's a growth in realizing that we're not this individual, separate entity, divorced from other people and the rest of the universe, that we're part of a living, growing, interconnected network of processes, a tapestry of life, that we're an intrinsic part, a thread that's woven through that tapestry, and that the only sane response of realizing our true potential, our true nature, is to break out of our self-centeredness into a transcendent vision of love, of energy, of fearlessness, of altruism, of empathy, of untrammeled freedom, unbounded freedom. That's the only real thing that a human being is here to do. We can't surely be here to buy a bigger house. Surely when any child is born. I've got a great nephew who's 3 months old, and nobody in their right mind would think that when he grows up, I hope he has a semi-detached house with a lawn and a good back garden. That would be so trite and trivial. You wish him fulfillment. You wish him, well, I do anyway, freedom, happiness, love, adventure, growth. That's what we surely yearn for. We settle for far less. And Buddhism's saying we settle for something tragically far less, something that is infinitely less than our true potential, our true nature. Anyway, so you meditate from the Buddhist perspective to realize your full potential. You meditate because it's part of this golden spiral path leading from wherever we are to this transcendent freedom that is free then from this round of birth and death and rebirth, at least in a compulsive sense. A Buddha or a Bodhisattva, an enlightened being, is said to be free to take embodied form, but they would only do so not out of some sort of compulsion for embodiment, but out of compassion to help other embodied beings. So it's a mythic vision. Enlightenment from a dharmic perspective isn't just an individual attainment. You don't even attain this transcendent consciousness for oneself. That doesn't really make sense. Traditionally, and particularly in later Buddhism, in Mahayana Buddhism, you do it for the benefit of all sentient beings. So you're in a heroic quest for all sentient existence, for the universe of beings. You're trying to wake all of them up out of the slumber of unenlightenment into this ultimate freedom. So that's a very, very different notion for meditation while you're meditating than I want to be a little bit happier so that I don't get so stressed at work. It's a very, very different notion. And although it can include that lesser notion. Okay, I want to come back to this well, what do we do? What does the quest look like? What does this spiral path look like? But I think it's probably time to have a break. So let's have a 5-minute break. You can get a drink, a hot drink. It's about 3 minutes past 8 according to the clock here. So let's start again at 8 minutes past 8, and I'll say more. Okay, good. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you're comfortable with your hot drink or refreshed and ready for some more. So, so far I've talked or tried to give a sense of what Buddhism isn't, and a bit of a sense of what the traditional Buddhist context is, the context in which we'd meditate. This transcendent perspective, I want to say more about that, and then a little bit more about how we sort of walk that spiral path, the journey from here to enlightenment. But this transcendent perspective is or the consciousness that we're moving towards, enlightened consciousness, is said to be beyond the notion of me and you, self and other. It's said to be beyond the dualism that I'm in here and you're out there, that I'm in here and there's a world out there that's separate from the me in here. That dualistic way of perceiving, which is very understandable, it's part of what biology seems to have bred into us for survival purposes. That dualistic way of perceiving is a delusion, according to the Buddha. And it's that dualistic perception that keeps us trapped in our small consciousness, in our small mind, where we're constantly grasping for fulfillment and never quite finding lasting fulfillment. So if we're going to transcend this sense of me as a separate fixed entity from the rest of the universe, somehow we have to transcend the notion that enlightenment is just something that I'm going to get, because otherwise it just becomes another thing about me. And the whole problem is that the notion of me is based on a delusion. Me, certainly as a separate and fixed entity, is based on a delusion. Not me as a living, growing, flowing stream of psychophysical processes. That's not deluded. That does seem to be happening. But that stream of psychophysical energy, or whatever it is, I'm struggling for words because we don't really have adequate words. Whatever that is, isn't separate from the rest of the environment, just as you can't separate a tree from the earth and from the atmosphere, the light and the oxygen and the carbon dioxide and the water and the nutrients of the soil. And you can't. A tree doesn't exist in isolation, even though you can point to it and say there is an oak tree. You can't look more closely, and you can't see the boundaries between when does a leaf start to, I don't know, when does it take in a molecule of carbon dioxide and when does it breathe out a molecule of oxygen, an atom of oxygen. You can't, there's no real boundary. When does air become leaf and light become leaf and leaf become air? There's no real boundaries to anything. So yes, we exist in some way, but not in the way that we think we do. And if we're going to transcend the delusion, then we have to transcend the self-centeredness that delusion is based on. And enlightenment can't become, well, it won't help if that becomes part of that me getting what I want kind of thing. So one answer that the tradition has come up with is think of others. Base your practice on serving others. Look, if you want to grow beyond this prison, this dualistic prison of self and other, then focus, as it were, on the other, because our self-centeredness comes very naturally, whereas our concern for the other is less strong for most of us. So focus on the happiness and well-being and fulfillment of others. One of the great Indian Buddhist masters, one of the Buddhist saints of 8th century India, was called Shantideva, and he, amongst other texts, he composed this masterpiece of Indian Buddhist literature called the Bodhicharyavatara. And he says it's a series of verses that take you on this spiral path, on this quest. And he says all those who suffer in the world do so because of their desire for their own happiness. And all those in the world who are happy are so because of their desire for the happiness of others. All those who suffer in the world do so because of their desire for their own happiness. What he's trying to point to is that our own preoccupation with self leads to our own suffering. Whereas if we can break out of me wanting what I want, and one way, the best way of doing that in a way, is to focus on the welfare of others, that leads to a sense of inner fulfillment, provided you don't do it in a martyrish way. It's so difficult to say anything about the Dharma because you always have to qualify it with, but there are dangers. And particularly, I think, in our post-Christian culture in the West, there is a tendency to become a martyr. So I will sacrifice myself for others and let them walk all over me. That's not Buddhism. So when Shantideva says, be concerned for the welfare of others, he's doing that on the basis of having a healthy sense of self, a healthy sense of self-respect, and an intelligent concern for oneself as well, for the well-being of oneself. That's why well-being isn't wrong, if you see what I mean. Buddhism starts from that. So, but beyond a certain level of concern for oneself, it's useless to then be ever more preoccupied with self. Yeah. Because however much success, power, money one acquires in life, fame, beauty, however much one acquires, it'll never be enough. It'll never be enough to be sufficient for the infinite longings of the heart, because the heart is yearning for this new type of consciousness. That is what the mind wants. Anyway, learning to concern ourselves with others is one way of doing that. That's what we do in the metta bhavana practice. But remember, in the metta practice, we start with metta for ourselves. So it's done on the basis of a healthy sense of self. Then you concern yourself with others. You can also do it the other way around. It's not that you have to wait until you have a completely healthy sense of self before you start helping others. You can do the two in parallel. In fact, you need to. We need to do the two in parallel. Generosity, that's another way of doing it. Again, not from a sense of guilt. You don't give in Buddhism from a sense of guilt. You give, or a sense of lack. You give from a plenitude, an exuberant, overflowing sense of richness. You share everything that's good, rather than hoard it as mine. Another thing that Shantideva says, if I give, what shall I enjoy? If I give, what shall I enjoy? Such concern for one's own welfare is fiendish. If I enjoy, what shall I give? Such concern for the welfare of others is divine. Do you see this sense of I have something, what shall I give? Is according to Shantideva, divine. But the other way of thinking, if I give, what will I get in return? He calls fiendish. He doesn't mince his words, Shantideva. So practice eventually, at some point anyway, has to move from thinking that I'm going to get something from practicing Buddhism to a much wider sense of what can I serve if I practice. I was thinking of the quest as it's talked about in, I was going to say Western stories, but actually stories all over the world. You have this notion of a heroic quest. Somebody sets out on a journey, and the journey, the task is well beyond them. It's the story of so many fairy tales, the backbone of so many fairy tales. And Maitreya Bandhu and I, in our community with Sanjay and others, were watching Lord of the Rings, as Maitreya Bandhu was talking about. And it's an archetypal quest that you can track the stages of an archetypal quest in Lord of the Rings. Not just Lord of the Rings, of course, but it's always involves doing something for others. It's not that Frodo and his companions want to just get something from themselves. They're doing it for the sake of their world. It has to be for something more than me. And along the way, there will be challenge, there will be ordeals, there will be obstacles, there'll be enemies that try and thwart you in your quest. There'll also be friends and allies and gifts and rewards along the way that will help you on your journey. Now that sort of poetic mythical truth is profoundly true. It's profoundly accurate. That's what the Dharma life, if you move towards enlightenment, it will feel at times like you're on this impossible quest. You're trying to do it for the sake of others, for the sake of everybody, for the sake of, in a way, the cosmos. You're on a cosmic mission, and it's way beyond you. And you meet all sorts of obstacles. In my case, I meet an obstacle every morning when I don't get out of bed in time for morning meditation. The obstacles are often, the enemies are often within. Sometimes they're without as well, but oftentimes we just meet the obstacles within, and we have to do battle with them. Sometimes day after day after day, year after year, we have to be prepared to be heroic in this quest. That's what these stories are telling us. They're telling us about something about the nature of life, because they're saying that unless you do embark on a quest which has as a goal something more than your personal satisfaction and well-being, unless you do that, your life will be impoverished. It's this quest that gives you a sense of fulfillment. Regardless of whether you succeed or not, the questing itself is part of the inner fulfillment. But yeah, you get obstacles, you have enemies, and setbacks, and you're required to go deeper, to draw forth courage that you didn't know you had, and resources that you didn't know you had, that are only discovered because they're demanded of you. If we don't do anything heroic with our lives, we'll never discover the resources that we have. We'll never discover the courage, the strength, the hugeness of heart that we're capable of, if it's not demanded from us. One of the incredible things about this pandemic has been that many people have been heroic in giving their lives, laying down their lives for others, and heroic in other ways. I'm thinking of the scientists who have worked day and night for and sacrificed their own well-being to develop vaccines. All over the world, we've got scientists now who are now trying to manufacture and roll out those vaccines. I mean, there's heroism in action going on, and there always is. But it's so easy to settle for less and to not have a larger quest that we're living for. And to live a timid sort of life. So sometimes when we talk about enlightenment, one of the things that I've heard people say is, yeah, but I don't experience that. What's he talking about? I don't experience transcendent states of consciousness. And, yeah, I'm not sure I believe in it. And I want to say, of course you don't experience them. You haven't even embarked on the quest yet. And the quest, from a dharmic perspective, is over lifetimes of striving. The Buddha said it was the hardest thing to do that a human being could do is to attain enlightenment for the sake of all beings. That was the hardest thing. He said that he used warrior imagery at one point, and he said that it was easier to conquer 1,000 men in battle 1,000 times over than to conquer one's own mind. This liberation of the mind is the most demanding, difficult thing, but the rewards, the riches that lie in wait are also beyond imagining. They're priceless. So, in a way, don't be too hasty to say, oh yeah, I don't experience enlightenment. Of course you don't. The point is, can we awaken our heart, our minds, our imagination to at least being open to the possibility that there's more than our current mind allows us to experience? That's the attitude you need. It's just a simple openness, a simple receptivity that there might be more. And if you have that openness, you're already ready to take that first step on the quest, and that receptivity can take you all the way. If you practice with effort, if you're willing to be courageous, if you're willing to sacrifice personal happiness for the sake of something bigger, if you're willing to take responsibility for yourself, for your own mind, if you're not going to give in to taking offence and blame. We live in such a culture where you only have to turn on your news feed or whatever, and somebody else is blaming somebody else for something that's awful in the world. Buddhism would say, no, let's take responsibility for our own lives and our own mind, and responsibility for trying to make the world a little bit of a better place. Never mind blaming somebody else for what they're doing wrong. That's not the point. Whereas we have raised this culture of blame, of hatred actually, that's what it is, of righteous indignation and hatred, to a phenomenal level. It's seen as moral to blame somebody if they're, I don't know, doing some damage to the environment, or if they say something racist, or as if that's moral to vent our anger and hatred. It's not. It really isn't, and it doesn't lead to any sense of increased joy in the world, or move us towards this transcendence of our self-centeredness. So there's responsibility for our own minds. There's on this quest we have to keep saying, whatever happens, I will try and remain aware and remain kind. Whatever I'm confronted with, however offensive the response I receive, can I respond with awareness and kindness, with appropriateness? Not in a meek way, not in just turn the other cheek kind of way. Yeah, we can be active and strong. Heroism will demand standing up for ourselves and our values, but can we do it with empathy, even with those that we fundamentally disagree with? Can we see their humanity, their potential Buddhahood, even as we say, no, I disagree? Yeah, that's what we're trying to learn. And that takes time and effort, and I feel after 20-something years of practice that I'm at the foothills of the mountain of, enlightenment. But every so often, I don't mind that, actually. I don't mind being in the foothills after 25 years of practice, because every so often I get a glimpse that it's like the sky clears and I see the peak of the mountain and I know it's true and I know it's there. And when I see it, I feel blessed. For even having embarked on the quest, it doesn't matter that I'm not enlightened. I have a glimpse, maybe a glimpse of that mountain peak, of the potential of the human heart and mind. And I think even that glimpse of a glimpse enriches my life. It makes me feel blessed. It's got a touch of gold about it. And even though I'm so far away from embodying all the qualities of enlightenment, it doesn't matter in a certain sense, because the journey, the quest, is already meaningful and fulfilling. Because on that quest, it's also, what's so wonderful about it is that you meet companions, you meet friends and companions who are also on the quest. You have to, somebody was saying on the winter retreat, how do I make friends in the Sangha? Well, really, you just have to keep practicing. You have to keep giving. You have to then, in a way, be patient, and you will meet companions and friends if you keep practicing. You don't have to despair. You're not alone. And you have to be really patient. You have to have a really long-term vision if you're going to embark on the Buddhist path. It has to be really long-term. Traditionally, it's lifetimes, many, many lifetimes. In Triratna, the quest has a particular staging post, which is ordination. So Maitreya Bandhu began this talk by talking about the names that we're given at ordination. Ordination is like a staging post on this quest. In a way, you're still in the foothills, but what happens at ordination is that you make a very clear and public commitment to never stopping, never turning back. You say that from now on, I am committed to gaining enlightenment for the sake of all beings, however long that takes. That commitment creates a certain transformation. I mean, transformation might be too big a word, but it creates a shift in one's being at a very, very deep level, at a level that might not even be perceptible to yourself till many years have passed. It does something very, very deep and very, very subtle, that commitment, and the witnessing of that commitment by others. It does something like perhaps what it does is it gives you a glimpse of that mountain peak. It gives you a glimpse of your potential, and it gives you a confidence that you're capable of reaching that potential. And it gives you a name, a myth to live your life by. And you join in Triratna an order of fellow heroic questers. Is that a word? People on the quest, journeyers who are travelling with you, and who you can feel such a deep sense of solidarity with that you even make a commitment to continue that companionship beyond this lifetime. It's a quest that is a commitment that takes you way beyond this lifetime. You have to ask for ordination, and I'm not suggesting that you rush up and ask for ordination. You have to be, in a way, you have to be sort of ready to even ask for ordination. But what I'm trying to do is show you that, although you can ask, I'm not saying you can't either, what I'm trying to do is show you that in Triratna there's a living tradition that goes all the way back to the Buddha and the first ordinations that the Buddha did. It's a living tradition that is global, of people living in the modern world trying to use the teachings of the Buddha and of subsequent enlightened masters and teachers all over the world, like Shantideva, use those teachings to quest for the highest goal that I think is humanly possible. In a theistic tradition, you can't become God. So Buddhism would say, well, that's not the ultimate quest. Serving God is not the ultimate quest. In Buddhism, what you're trying to do is become a Buddha, and not for your own sake, but for the sake of all that lives, all that moves. And if you achieve Buddhahood, it doesn't even stop there. It's said that enlightenment isn't the end point, that the journey of unfolding ever more creative, beautiful, positive, wise, free states is endless. What happens at Buddhahood, Bhante Sangharakshita calls it a horizon point, that we can't see beyond the horizon. It's said that at Buddhahood there is no longer any trace left of self-centeredness. There's no longer any trace of not just selfishness, but of any self-centered craving or any ill will or any sense of doubt or fear. There's none of that left. But the vastness of the positive states that open up, the cosmos that opens up, is infinite. The freedom that opens up doesn't have a limit. So even a Buddha it's not a static thing. There's no stasis. So that for me seems like, well, what else is there to do? Are we going to settle for I'm a little less stressed? Or are we going to embark on a mythic quest that's mythic in that cosmic sense, but is ever so real, ever so achievable in this lifetime? I know that because although I'm a long way from it, I've had sufficient glimpses of the potential to know that it's true, it's real. And as I say, for me, that feels like more blessings than I could ever have anticipated when I walked into this Buddhist center as a young man, as a 20-something-year-old, stumbled in, hoping that there was real magic here. I found that more than 1,000-fold over and over again, and I hope you do too. Thank you very much.